Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, we are starting 2024 off strong because this year we are hyper-focused on actually building, growing, and scaling your business. And today's guest is a master at one of the most essential ingredients when it comes to growing and scaling your business, and that is people. That is talent. Let me tell you all about today's guest. His name is Raul Mendoza. Raul has been a positive instigator in the talent acquisition space for the last 20 plus years, helping startups and complex businesses attract and retain top talent in a variety of areas. In 2002, he walked into a staffing agency where he found his start in talent acquisition. Speaking Spanish fluently as a second language, he began as a bilingual receptionist and very quickly became an on-site director managing multiple accounts. He's worked in dynamic and entrepreneurial environments. As a founding member, he was integral in helping build a boutique staffing firm from the ground up. This is crazy. With only 2 employees to 70 plus consultants dispersed across the country remotely. Also, as a key member of a small team, his contributions helped expand a rapidly growing gene therapy startup from 700 employees when he joined in early 2019 to nearly 2,000 plus employees. Raul is one of us. He's a fellow entrepreneur. He went full-time with his own business, Rapido Talent, at the end of last year. So I'm so excited to hear his journey. We're going to learn a lot from Raul today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Raul Mendoza. All right, Raul, I'm so excited that you're here, kicking us off in the first week of 2024. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I am thrilled to be here.
Heck yeah. So obviously I tease listeners a little bit about how awesome you are and your bio, but take us beyond the bio. What's your short story of how the heck you ended up doing all this awesome stuff that you've gotten into?
Totally. Yeah, I basically started my career path here in the talent space. I was deciding whether or not I wanted to go to college or, basically I wanted to go to college and I was making plans to do so. And basically I stepped into a staffing firm here in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and looking for just a temp job just to make some money and for the summer and to start putting money away to go to school. And essentially from that, stepped into that staffing company, and they were looking for a bilingual receptionist. So I'm like, well, I speak Spanish. And that's basically how I got my start in talent acquisition. I started on the agency side or the vendor side, and basically spent the first decade of my career on that side of the desk, doing search for both small boutique firms, also having, like you mentioned in the bio, being kind of that right-hand man to other entrepreneurs and building out agencies, and to current time, now I'm doing my own thing. So that's a little bit there.
Yeah, I love that overview, Raul. I'm going to ask you because I feel like that's a word that we all hear so frequently in business, talent acquisition. And I know that for me for a long time before I understood the art or the science, actually, we're going to go there for sure in today's conversation. I just thought talent acquisition, what does it mean? Well, it means putting out a job posting, hoping that the right candidates apply, and then using the art or the science, I want to hear your perspective on that, of selecting the right talent. Walk us through that. What does talent acquisition actually mean rather than just hoping that the right candidates apply? And Raul, is this an art? Is it a science? Is a little bit of both? Share some insights there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do absolutely agree that it is a little bit of both. It's both an art and a science. But I think before we get into the art or the science, it's about people. I think having a passion for people. Recruiting at the end of the day is about relationship. And relationships take time. There's no amount of technology, there's no amount of science that can speed that process up. You have to be passionate about people, passionate about building relationships. genuinely care about people. And, the experience of actually helping people understand where they fit, that's a complex process. So it requires both understanding people, and there's tools and personality assessments to help individuals along that journey. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I really boast here with my company, Rapido Talent, is we're about getting the right people in the right places, and you can't have the right place without the right people, because people make an organization. You build organizations with people, not systems and technology. Systems and technology are an assist. That's the science piece, but people are the ones that make the magic happen. They're the ones that are using the tech. They're the ones that are coming up with the ideas. And every organization has a different DNA. And it's understanding that DNA, understanding the DNA of the people that you're going after, and marrying that up. And yeah, so I guess a little bit of a recruiting scientist is what you can call me.
I love that, Raul, because you're right, it is. And I mean, when it comes to science, for example, obviously I'm thinking about that analogy of like all the different chemical reactions that happen under. If you mix one thing with another, it's going to be a different outcome than mixing it maybe even in a different order. And I think that when you bring us back to that people element of growing a business, that people element of growing a team, that people element of attracting, retaining talent, what I really like, it says it right on your website. I mean, you are not shy about this. You write, big headline, people are your company's greatest asset. But what I really like and what I want to hone in on, Raul, is you wrote, our passion is helping you find the right people for the right positions. And I think that playing with that scientist role, I think that that's such an important aspect of it, is not just the right people. Finding the right people is one thing, but getting them in the right positions, enabling them to use their skills, to do things that they're passionate about, that's an essential part of it. Talk to us about that, because I think that we have a tendency of honing in on, hey, the hiring process, but we lose sight of the maintaining, the growing, the embedding process. Talk to us about the importance and where talent acquisition and retaining talent, what's the scope of it? Where does it start? Where does it stop?
Totally. I think it's interesting because I think a lot of organizations think that the recruiting process starts with finance approving the requisition or the several positions that are looking to be filled. And that's not where it starts. I really believe in, as I said earlier, relationships take time. And if we're waiting to look to fill positions for organizations and build organizations with what I believe is their most precious asset, people, it takes time to unearth that treasure. It takes time to unearth those gems. So I tell organizations that you're late to the party if you're starting your recruiting on a position when the rec got approved. It starts long before that. I think recruiting is all about planning, and it's all about proactive activity. And I think it starts with, depending upon the position that you're looking for, the organization that you're looking to work with or find people to work for them. We have to have a long-term plan. Long before finance approves requisitions, we need to understand, okay, what are we looking to build here? Whether it's a finance department, whether it's a business intelligence group, and let's, instead of reacting, let's be proactive and begin to think about, okay, what are the soft skills that we're looking to attract? So having these conversations, I think even as a business owner, as I'm thinking, the next 3 to 5 to 10 years out, I'm thinking, okay, first of all, it's about values. It's about what do we value as an organization? What do we hold true? What is our true north as a company? And those values will shape what kind of people and character we want to have in our organization. Coupled with that, we got to look at hard skills as well. So, if we're looking at finance people, we're looking at, maybe we need somebody that has had corporate finance experience or, so making sure that those skills are dialed in as well. So it's not just character, but it's competency, and marrying those two things up to get the right blend of people. But again, that's informed by values. Like what do you hold as valuable as an organization? What are the things that are your true north? What do you aspire your organization to be? And then actually going at it and beginning to talk to people, have conversations with people, because you can have an idea, but then you start talking to individuals and you realize, oh, you know what? This type of skill set, I'm not seeing this type of skill set with this type of value blend, and all of a sudden you're back to the drawing board and you're like, but I'm finding people that have this skill set and maybe this value blend. I talked to 10 people in the last month. And so, it can shift from what you think, you can have an idea, you can have a plan, and that can shift as you talk to people and more. And then once you have those conversations, and so I call that kind of the courting stage, so I think, a lot of talent acquisition organizations, they think, okay, rec is on, let's start sourcing, let's start sending emails. No, I think even before sourcing, even before the rec, there's the courting phase of actually getting to know people. There's the planning phase. It's, what would you like your wedding to look like? To use that analogy, people court because they want to eventually find a partner to get married. And I think in the same way in the talent acquisition space, you have to court people. You have to, and that courting process is also a process of learning people and understanding what they value, understanding their skills, understanding their experiences, and realizing, do I want to, hypothetically speaking, figuratively speaking, do I want to marry this person? Do I want to bring them into this organization and create this marriage of success and prosperity for the business and for this person's career?
Yeah, Raul, we're going through all the great analogies here today. I love the fact that we're on the dating analogy. No, seriously, because when you say courtship, what I think, and as someone who is single and in my 30s and on the prowl, Raul, what I think of is I love that analogy because for me, I'm just like, you need that. You keep coming back to values, Raul. And when it comes to dating, what do we first need to do is we need to figure out our own values. What is it that who am I and what do I value so that I can go find those right things? So I love that you're bringing it back to those basic ingredients, the fundamentals that I think most people skip. Most people think, to use the dating analogy again, it's about the other person, but it's equally about us. It really, I always say, Raul, takes two to tango. And I think it's so important to consider that is it's not just the right candidate. The right candidate could be the right candidate for another company, but are they the right candidate for your company? So I really love that perspective, Raul. And you said one of my favorite words when it comes to growth and building a company and scaling, which is the P word, plan. Raul, so many people, when they hear the word plan, they think, oh, does that mean a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan? They get so laser focused in on the timeline that constitutes a plan that they forget about the strategies, the tactics that can also fill in that plan. What is a customized plan? What does that look like when it comes to talent acquisition, when it comes to growing our teams? Does that mean knowing, hey, in 6 months, I'm going to hire for this role. 3 months after that, I'm going to hire for this role. What does a plan actually look like so we can stay on top of it this year?
Totally. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think practically speaking, I think, there's, working with different talent acquisition leaders and executive leaders of organizations, both small and big, I think if we're able to get ahead of the game and understand what we're looking to hire the next year, versus trying to get approval, obviously there's those pieces, but, just the practical pieces of getting approval, getting finance to do this. But I like the idea of at least a year to 90 days out, depending upon what we're looking to build. I think startup life, when it comes to startup organizations, things shift and move so much that if you're able to have a plan for 90 days out, I think that's a success. So it really is determined on the size of the organization. But I like to, think of it as workforce planning. So let's look a year out. Let's look 5 years out. where do we want to be? And 10 years can be challenging, but I think that 1 to 5 year window is helpful. 1 year is helpful for maybe a smaller mid-sized organization. 5 years out might be a little more robust for a more complex organization as well. So I think time frame is important, but just I think any kind of proactive measures there to building a workforce and having those conversations is essential. Building out the profiles, having conversations of the type of technology that you want these individuals to use. I think that needs to be part of that conversation with that leader. I think for me, I hope that answers the question. I feel like I might have gotten lost there a little bit.
No, it's good because it actually gives me a launch pad, because I think an important ingredient of this, Raul, is a lot of people will probably be listening to us thinking, gosh, a year out, 5 years out, I don't know where my business is going to be there. And it lends me to having, I'm in I think this is my 16th year of entrepreneurship. I started my first business when I was 19 years old. And from there, Raul, I really learned, to me, the big thing in hiring people and growing my teams, which is such a fortunate part of my entrepreneurial journey, is that age-old question of when do I start to hire? And we've had guests who come on in the past and they're like, it's never too early to hire. And for me as an entrepreneur, it's scary, obviously, to hear that. But I think the more mature I've gotten as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, the more I've realized, well, it's about creating excess value so that I can keep hiring. The goal is for me to be able to hire. Talk to us about that, because so much of talent acquisition, it's not just, do we all want to hire and we all want to outsource our work and we all want to grow our team? Of course we do. However, we want to do it in the right way, and we want to do it in a way that's married with our business objectives and with the realities of where our business is. Raul, you've helped businesses grow from 700 employees to 2,000 employees. There's a lot of business things that happen there, not just talent acquisition or HR types of things that happen. Talk to us about that intersection of business milestones, revenue setting, revenue achievements with that talent acquisition.
Totally. I think, yes, there's a lot there. I think, just to distill it further, I think, first of all, I'm getting a little bit lost here.
It's fun to work through it here on the air, Raul, because these are the real life business things. If we're sitting here thinking about all the different ways to dissect it, listeners for sure are facing that in their real life businesses. So, even walk us through some examples. Like, what did it look like when you were at the gene therapy startup, and what were the circumstances in which you were able to grow? Because I think a lot of times we lose sight of revenue, we lose sight of profit, we lose sight of that added value when it comes to growth. And I'm sure you've got a ton of interesting perspectives from real life examples that you've lived.
For sure. No, thank you for that. Let me just use the example of, so I think I'm just kind of getting lost in the question a little bit, and I'll take that, and I apologize for that. So you want to know specifically how you start from,
I'd say it's the marriage of business growth with team growth. It's almost like, I guess I could rephrase the question as the chicken or the egg. Do we focus on that business growth first to create that excess value to be able to hire? Or obviously, if I can hire more, then I can grow faster. How do we navigate the intersection of those two?
Totally. Okay. Well, let's start here. I think you have to set goals, and sometimes you set goals based on your research. I think understanding where a business market might be. For instance, I think for when I was at the gene therapy company that I worked for, we were looking at the sales were increasing, and there was a definite need for this gene therapy. So that informed how we would go about essentially building out our operations and our manufacturing locations across the country, which would then So, in terms of bricks and mortar, but then also, that would inform how many people we need this many people in the science lab. We need this many people on the biochemistry side. It's just a combination of things here that are needed. So, it's understanding how the sales pipeline is doing, and if that's increasing, and we've got sales locked in through the rest of the year, like the gene therapy company, we were starting to get approvals across the United States and Europe to go ahead and begin releasing this gene therapy. That can be a very lengthy process of just having government permission to be able to offer this as an option for families with this particular issue. And this particular gene therapy company had, I won't go into the details there, but so I think, having that sales pipeline and having those approvals, that kind of informs, okay, what kind of operations do we need to be able to meet this demand? And then, so that's the business side. And then marrying that up with the people side, well, then if we need these types of operations, then we need to have this many people. So that's where the planning process begins. And, I think there is, I think that's an ideal situation, because we're able to be thoughtful about how to, essentially we can be thoughtful about how we're going to put those postings out there, just the tactics of job postings have value, sourcing has value. These are tactics, but that's the business informing the TA side of things. And then we just kind of we begin to put our plans together, and we look at our values. We begin doing that outreach and start building those relationships.
Yeah, Raul, I'm gonna admit here on the air, I'm glad I pushed you on that, because I think that answer you just gave us reveals so much about your secret sauce, because it really shed even more light on that planning process. Because what I heard as a business owner and as a business leader is I heard something fascinating about your approach, which is I feel like where I got this wrong in my entrepreneurial career was waiting for that revenue to come in. And obviously planning, what's behind planning is that super level of intentionality. And what I heard is you talked about looking at your sales pipeline. You talked about looking at the demand. And what I'm thinking is all those times I made wrong decisions because I was reactive to things that already happened. Oh my gosh, I already took too many clients on. Now how do I hire? Now you're in that disadvantageous position. Whereas what you're talking about is really being strategic. And I really love those insights right there. I want to talk to you about the other side of the equation, because I think it's so easy for us to focus on. I would imagine that the sexy part of your job is that attraction of new talent. But the least sexy, but I would argue probably the more important part of your job is that retaining of talent, the developing of talent. Talk to us about some of the things there, because I know there's both strategy and tactics within each of these domains. We could probably do entire episodes about that, but what do you see as the important stuff when it comes to retaining and developing talent?
Absolutely. I think, doing that, going back to that marriage analogy that we used earlier, just the courtship that happens in talent acquisition. I think in that process, we're trying to understand values. And that that's important because that brings us to retention and development of people. If we don't have that right alignment of values and skill, character and competency, it's that marriage is going to be hard to keep up, because retention and the retention piece and the development piece require work both on our part as an organization, but also, or the part of the organization, but also on the part of the individual. And it's kind of going back to the marriage day, all the planning that goes into getting married, right? But then there's the actual hard work of being married. I've been married for 11 years now, and man, that the excitement and elation of making plans to actually marry my best friend, and then there's the honeymoon, there's the honeymoon phase, but that very quickly, 90 days in, that honeymoon phase quickly fades and you start to get into the work. And that's where the alignment of values and the skill or capacity to do the work really comes to bear. And so again, I don't want to underestimate the front end, because the front end really makes the back end here, which is the retention piece, the development piece. And so I think when it comes to developing people, which help us retain people, it's having values, it's understanding and marrying those things up, competency and character. But then I think it's individualized per individual. And I think it's coming, and I think the best format for this is ongoing communication. A lot of the times with organizations that I work with, they are, to me, annualized reviews and quarterly conversations isn't sufficient. Relationships are much more dynamic than that. Development is much more dynamic than that. I really encourage organizations to build regular check-ins with their people, and on a weekly basis, and be intentional about it. And so again, using the statement, fail to plan to fail. I think that goes with people as well. We have to be intentional in our, just like in marriage, we have to be intentional even after we're married and we're in the work of being married, having kids, raising kids. You have to go on date nights, and hopefully that's regular, because that keeps things moving, that keeps communication lines going, that keeps passions aligned. In the same way with individuals in an organization, having that regular check-in to understand where they're at, how they're feeling, where they feel they need skill, they need upskilling, and providing that opportunity either through conferences or through book clubs, through additional training, maybe taking more education, getting your MBA if that makes sense, certifications, those types of things. Again, it goes back to relationship, and it starts with relationship, and you stay in relationship by having those regular check-ins. And I think there's value for both small and large organizations in doing that.
Yeah, good advice on so many levels. That's the thing I love about business, Raul, is all this advice not only works for us when it comes to growing businesses, but growing relationships, growing our lives, we could do analogies that span into fitness and health and all of those things, because I think all of this stuff is just a microcosm of life. So I think it's really good advice all around that we can take on board and we can actually use it. And with that in mind, I do want to squeeze a little bit more brilliance out of you here today as we come towards the end of this episode, because one thing that I think is so unique about your journey is that you were a founding member of that boutique staffing firm that had consultants all across the country remotely. And I think that remote work and remote teams is such an interesting aspect of the way that businesses grow today. Because I think about, gosh, when I still lived in Boston, when I was a teenager and I had my first internship, we had like volleyball outing days at an island off the coast of Massachusetts. That was a cool way for us to have those team elements. We can't necessarily do that when our team lives inside of Slack. Give us some insights, whether it's a few strategies or a few tactics that you know of. What are some really good ways for teams to create those touch points, those relationships that you talked about, even when we're working remotely?
Yeah. That's a great question, and that continues to be an ongoing challenge for both small and large organizations across the board. Remote work is, and now the pendulum is shifting, as you know, with, now that we're past COVID and all of this, we are in a situation where there's large organizations that are enforcing folks to come back. And, then you've got other organizations that are swinging the other way. So, yeah, either way, I think remote work is here to stay. And it's just figuring out in terms of performance and in terms of productivity and really making sure that people are getting the most out of it, and organizations are getting the most out of it. And there's accountability built into it. Again, it goes back to relationship. I think having meaningful interactions with your teams that are geographically dispersed, is probably the most important thing that a leader of a geographically dispersed team can do. And what I mean by that is, there's so much of our work that's scheduled when you're remote. So creating space and time, like checking in with people outside of those scheduled times to have meaningful interactions, whether it's to encourage them and celebrate a win with them, whether it's to do, to play an impromptu game, and just get the team together. I think that's. I think you need to have some spontaneity to something that's already structured, because relationships are both intentional and spontaneous. So you have to create that within the digital work environment, the remote work environment. So, being, just taking time to reach out to those on your team outside of those structured times, and then also having times throughout the year, throughout the month, where you as a team are coming together in person as well. I found that throughout my experience with both small and large organizations that have geographically dispersed teams, a lot of the times, I think post-COVID, people would have meetings for meeting's sake. But now that, or I should say pre-COVID, people would have meetings for meeting's sake. But post-COVID, one of the beauties of having remote or geographically dispersed teams is we can be intentional about the times that we gather together as teams throughout the year, and celebrate together, and that really fuels connection and really builds culture in a way that I think we take for granted when we're in a brick and mortar office every single day and going to scheduled meetings to scheduled meeting. I think on this end of it, we have an opportunity to be very, very intentional about our gathering time. So I still think you need both, and both require intentionality, and that's what I would say.
Yeah, Raul, boom. I'm going to call this out right there, because I have talked to so many people that work in the fields of HR, in the fields of talent acquisition, in the fields of building a team culture. And Raul, one piece of advice that I've never heard that I want to echo again, because I think it's so important for listeners to take on board as we grow our own businesses, is something so brilliant that you said that I've never thought about. Build spontaneous interactions in, especially with your remote team. As soon as you said that, I thought about past jobs where, your boss can just swing by your desk and just put a hand on your shoulder and say, hey, how are things going? And I think that's so important. How can we replicate that online? And obviously, having a weekly meeting is cool, but just intermittently, spontaneously chiming in and being like, hey, how are you doing today? I know that it's Wednesday afternoon. I know that I hit my 2 p.m. lull. What's going on your side? Those spontaneous interactions, I would imagine you're getting me excited to implement this with my teams. I can imagine that that's the stuff that matters even more so than the planned stuff. So really good advice there, Raul. Gosh, this is such a fun way to kick off the new year of episodes, because you brought a level of intentionality here. And I always love asking my guests the hard question, which is that tangible takeaway. Listeners heard so much brilliance from you here today. A lot of good analogies that give us food for thought. And I think you've really challenged us to be more strategic and intentional when it comes to planning our business growth, our people growth. So with all that in mind, Raul, what's your best advice? What's the one thing that you hope every listener takes on board from this episode and says, you know what? I'm finally going to sit down and I'm going to do this. What's something you want them to do?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that I would want to leave listeners with is that the importance of relationship and building relationship. I think, again, whether it's on the talent acquisition side, starting to recruit doesn't start when the rec is approved and you post it. It starts long before that. And I think building the muscle of enjoying to engage and connect with people in a very digital time is so important. And I would encourage our viewers and to really take time to be intentional about meeting with people, meeting in person, and building intentional relationships with those that they want to do business with, but also with those that they want to bring on to their respective organizations, and valuing that and building that muscle. I think one of the things that COVID has done is it's create a lot of flexibility, but I think there's been a minimizing of the piece of actual in-person connection and building relationship and figuring that out. And I would encourage individuals to find their voice and find what works for them in that respect and intentionally build that into their schedules. And it could start with just getting together for lunch once a week with someone that you're inspired by in business, that is doing maybe something that you're doing, but is further ahead, or somebody that you'd like to hire and you'd like to have, or there's qualities or characteristics of their background and experience that that you really value and admire and would like to have that. So I think relationship will come a long way.
Yes. Amen to all of that, Raul. That is amazing advice that is actionable for every single one of us, no matter where we are in business. And I'm going to call out all of you entrepreneurs that are out there that are listening. This year, you're committed to growing your business. That advice that Raul just gave us all right there, you can take action on it immediately. Those relationships are going to be your biggest assets. And Raul, I love so much of the work that you're doing. I know that listeners are going to be keen to check out your business, especially since, congratulations, you are a full-time entrepreneur as well these days, which I love seeing that. I love everything that you're doing with Rapido Talent, including, I really like the headline on your website, Intelligent Talent Strategies at the Pace of Life. I think that's so important for us to acknowledge. So, Raul, with all that in mind and all this great advice that you've given us, where should listeners go to learn more about you, your business, and all the great work that you're up to?
Absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. I have a lot of my thought leadership pieces there. Feel free to send me a message, DM me. I'd love to get lunch. I'd love to meet you virtually. And we can go from there. But yeah, those would be all my links.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find Raul as well as his business, Rapido Talent, which is at rapidotalent.com. Find those links as well as all of his socials and his personal LinkedIn down below wherever it is that you're tuning in. Otherwise, Raul, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this knowledge with us on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Such a pleasure, Brian. Thank you.